Arijit, you're joining us in Toronto for the Canada East Institutional Forum for a panel on the future of sustainable investing. As treasurer of York University, can you give us a sneak peek into what you're planning to bring to that conversation?
Sure, Courtney, and thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to the panel. I think that it's just not what I'm bringing to the panel. The panel in itself and my co-panelists are actually terrific. Michael McGowan is part of it. He's the general manager for infrastructure at Canada Post. He has incredibly deep knowledge of that asset class and that space. So he's going to be bringing a lot to that. In terms of sustainable investing specialists, from Mercer, the Zhangfang Zhu, who is a really practically oriented, sustainable investing professional. I've had the good fortune of having one-on-one conversations with her, and I've always been impressed by how practical and how thoughtful she is in her approach. While I don't know Sarah Hughes of American Century personally, I have had the privilege of listening to her at previous forums, for example, the Canada West Forum that Marcus Group ran, and she's also very thoughtful in her approach to sustainable investing. So what do I bring? Well, I'm going to be the voice of the allocator, of a smaller allocator on there. But from the York University perspective, we feel that sustainable investing is just one of those things that has to be ingrained into the whole investing process. And we take it seriously when we pick our investment managers. And it would be remiss for me to say that the panel is also going to be expertly moderated by Danielle Emile, and had the chance to briefly chat with her. And I think that the audience is in for a treat. It's going to be a really good panel.
Fantastic. And with no unified national development plan and ongoing debates around climate, labor, and energy policy, Arijit, how are you thinking about navigating sustainable investment initiatives in this environment right now?
That's a fantastic question, Courtney. And I'm looking at it from the perspective of being very macro oriented and top down, and then understanding what we as allocators can do from the bottom up. So from the top down, the narrative for the past, say, decade or so, 2015 to late 2025, where in Canada, we had a government that really did not want to move forward in terms of energy security, but talked always about net zero and sustainable investing. Fast forward now to 2026, and it's very clear that with a change in administration in the United States early in 2025, and also a change in leadership in Canada in 2026, and the geopolitical turmoil that we're having globally, that energy security has to be top of mind. So any questions of how we're incorporating sustainable investing doesn't just focus on getting to net zero and so-called sustainable investments. We're also focusing on energy security, because no nation and no civilization is going to go forward and progress without energy security in place. And strictly from the perspective as a Canadian, we realize that in Canada, we've got every resource that's required for energy security, be it oil and gas, be it uranium for nuclear, be it any kind of mineral that you'd require for mining, both in traditional energy and for sustainable energy. That's all fine and good, but we've not had the policies in place in order to move forward. And all of a sudden, with great turmoil globally, there is a real premium that's now going to be placed on having energy security. So I think we do have to think in that prism. It's not going to be either or. We have to think of it in terms of let's have both in place and allocate accordingly.
Interesting. And speaking of energy, the panel will explore the intersection of energy transition technology and reshoring manufacturing. Without giving too much away, is there a thread in that space you're particularly eager to pull on during that discussion?
I would love for the audience to consider a number of things. Firstly, the narrative around reshoring assumes that there's going to be a number of things that are just going to come back to America, a number of companies. But I think that we have to step back and look back at the time that President Bill Clinton was in office in the United States, and how he allowed China to get into the WTO, and how from that period onwards, from say 2000, 2001, China has really dominated every facet of the value chain. So it started with cheap goods. And so that's the bottom of the value chain. And in the West, whether it's in the US, in Europe, Western Europe, in Canada, we've always had this demand for cheap things. So we swapped our manufacturing base. Our manufacturing base went away, went to places like China. And the Chinese administration And Chinese companies built things at scale to provide the world. And as you well know, everyone's got the saying, well, China is the world's factory. So fast forward from 2000 to 2026, they've gone up that value chain. So it's not just cheap stuff that we want that they're making now. They're making absolutely everything. So how does reshoring happen and what does it look like? Well, if it's going to happen in practicality, it's going to happen on the back of highly capital intensive reshoring. It's not going to be done through high employment. There's this in economics, there's this classical trade-off between labor and capital, and you have to consider what amount you're allocating to each in terms of any company. I foresee reshoring as really advanced manufacturing if it's going to happen. And by advanced manufacturing, I mean mostly robotics, where you're going to have some highly qualified people within a plant. So that's already happening in China. That's happened for some time in Japan, where they don't have demographics in their favor. And so there are lots of robotics in place, just as a general high level. Secondary to that is we have this expectation that reshoring will result in greater employment, but our labor costs are high compared to that part of the world where we're expecting to reshore from. So I just don't see that happening from a cultural standpoint. And also from a cultural standpoint, let's be very clear that 996 is a thing in China. The idea of working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week is not going to fly here. So I'm a skeptic in terms of how much reshoring is actually going to happen, but we can delve into that a bit deeper.
Absolutely. And for institutional investors considering joining us in Toronto, what do you think they can expect to take away from your panel conversation?
Well, from my panel conversation, I think it's going to be some very honest discussion, sometimes debate on what sustainable investing is going to look like in the years to come. But I would urge them to also look at the other panels that are going to be in place. There's some terrific panels in there. There's going to be a panel on portfolio construction and finding the best opportunities. And the individuals who are going to be speaking to that, they're from the large Maple Lake type of pension plans. So they're very, very smart people. And usually is the ideas from those kind of institutions that disseminate down to smaller institutions that I represent. There's going to be a panel on the future proofing of private equity. Private equity has been top of mind because that whole space has had a hard time returning capital to investors, given the macro environment and given the rates environment, and also given the dearth in terms of IPOs as possible exits. So how's that going to look and how's that going to affect portfolios in the future? Allocators like myself have to be cognizant that they're going to lock up their capital for a decade when they put it into private equity. So are we going to have different kinds of private equity vehicles that are made for things like the wealth channel? That's not necessarily a good thing for institutions. So institutions have to be wary as to what could happen in that space. And I think of great interest, and this is going to be very timely for the audience at the forum in the next week, is a geopolitical analysis from the people at IMCO. And I think that the timing for that could not be better. I know that it's very unfortunate for the people who are suffering in places like Iran in particular, but you look at what's happening in terms of the commodity markets, in terms of oil, in terms of LNG. I think that the timing is actually perfect for a fulsome discussion on there. And I think that we're all very aware that there's been issues with private credit. So there are a number of panels that are going to delve into private credit and also asset-backed lending. That's going to be very timely for institutions.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to hearing from those panels as well. And Arijit, what are you personally most looking forward to at the forum?
Well, there's the saying that you always have to embrace learning, and learning is continuous. I view opportunities to go to a forum like this as an opportunity to meet my peers, exchange some ideas, listen to the panelists, have my own ideas and beliefs challenged, which is a very healthy thing. Just as I don't expect everyone to believe or understand or agree with everything that I say. I think it's a two-way street. It's part of the learning process to have your own assumptions challenged and to learn from others. And this is what these kinds of forums bring. So whether it's from my peers or from the investment managers, it's a great opportunity to exchange those ideas in a good setting.
Fantastic. Well, we're so excited to have you join us. Thank you so much, Arijit, for taking the time to share a sneak peek into what you plan to bring. And we look forward to seeing you there.
Thanks, Courtney. I look forward to it.